Alright, so we're going to be talking about making my own system today because I've actually been working on one on and off for the past little while. It's been a couple of years. I've gone through a handful of versions of it. I've been working on it for long enough that I've got a working character sheet and a basic system going. It's not complete, it's not ready. But I want to use these videos that I'll be making for on and off as a method of documenting my journey on making this system and just how I feel about it, what worked, what didn't, talking about the different systems and things I've designed for it, and eventually maybe, running my own game with it on stream or through a video where I could just talk about what happened with it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Urban Arcana. So I'd like to start by talking about what exactly I wanted to accomplish with this system, and just the general instance of where and why it kind of came about. This actually all started way back in around, I want to say, early 2010s area, before I started high school, when I first got into Dungeons & Dragons itself. Excuse me, I had been really into the idea of building my own maps, building my own worlds, building my own stuff, and D&D seemed like a perfect way to do it. And what I was doing was actually drawing out whole rooms and just making every little possible detail of the world on multiple sheets of paper. It was a really stupid project. Unfortunately, I don't have an image because it was kind of silly. I never took one at the time. I never had a device to capture it. I didn't have a phone or a camera, or heck, even we still had iPods back then. But eventually it was scrapped, and I decided to just use existing maps until more recently when I've started doing my own maps again. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to accomplish a modern fantasy with this system where it was modern day technology level while still maintaining that fantasy magic theme, meaning you could put in pretty much whatever you wanted for a fantasy world and still have a working system. And I felt that D&D couldn't accomplish this because it was very, very intended to be a fantasy game. Even the spells that duplicate things like hacking are spells, not abilities that your character can do. And I want to change that. What I want to accomplish with this system is the ability to have your character either could focus on magic, could focus on abilities, just features, or still even do a mix of both and be as good as another player without, making it difficult to build. And I think I've accomplished the basics of that goal while I'm still working on the specifics, like making more features, making more spells, making more abilities. I don't think I'm losing anything by just making the system. It's still very much early development. I barely have any mechanics actually properly built, and there's a lot of stuff for it that needs development, but it's not bad so far, and I think that it actually has a lot of merit just to practice using this to build my own adventures. And it's honestly been really fun. I've had a lot of fun just building and doing and seeing what sticks, what doesn't. And I think that's probably one of the first takeaways I want to bring in this video, is that I'm making a system that I enjoy, and I want other people to enjoy it too. But the process of building that system, putting all that together, is still just as fun as actually playing the system. So what do I mean by the phrase modern fantasy? Well, what I'm intending to go for here is a modern day alternate history to Earth, similar to something like Deadlands, where it's a real life location, but you're playing in a fantasy version of it. So in this case, monsters like dragons, wendigos, goblins, all that exists. but due to the rules of the world that I'm putting in, they're not interacting with normal society very often, and have been relegated, like in real life, to the area of myth and legend. This is where a couple things come in, and these are going to be the core mechanics I'm building off of in order to kind of establish not only the lore, but also the mechanics of the system. The first of these, and arguably one of the two more important ones, is something I'm calling the Veil. Now, the Veil is effectively something akin to the Mist in Percy Jackson, or other sort of block who's not intended from viewing what's actually happening type magics and stuff like that. The Veil is a metaphysical, metaphorical sort of barrier between the realm of magic and the realm of reality. Anything that's from mythological, folklore, anything like that, they exist, they live in the Veil. And within the Veil, they are natural occurring flora, fauna, all sorts of things. Occasionally, they get into the real world or are created in the real world through similar legends to how they're created in real life. For example, a basilisk can be created by hatching, if we're going by the Harry Potter definition of hatching a egg under a toad and whatever, you could definitely make a basilisk that way. That could happen. But more likely, a naturally born basilisk will be from the Veil. Now, the Veil is similar to something like I believe it's pronounced Dot. It's an Egyptian term that refers, as I understand it, refers to a many-layered, almost infinite depth dimension, partly connected to the afterlife. And I've drawn a lot of inspiration from different mythologies for this, but the idea is it's a other dimension where all magic is pulled from. If you want to cast a spell, you have to have crossed the Veil. You have to have been able to interact with and be a part of that realm, which fundamentally changes you in order to be able to cast magic. In lore, if we're talking medical sides of things, there actually would be a magical organ people who have crossed the Veil grow that lets them manipulate and access things on the other side of the Veil. The second, and arguably the other most important factor that I'm building this game around, is the courts. And the courts are something I really want to do for to add intrigue, to add knowledge, and to add a bit of why is this world different to my game compared to just, oh, it's Earth but magic. And I started I actually heard a lot about conspiracy theories during this time, about like shadow governments, secret lizard people, stuff like that, and I was like, what if that was legit and real, but instead of being a like conspiracy theory of like evil governments taking over the world, it's just they don't want the normal world to know about magic because it makes them powerful, therefore they hide it. And it's led to the development of the courts. Now the courts kind of work like Pokemon Go teams, I guess would be an easy way to describe it. If you are a member of someone who can use, view, or do magic in any other circumstance, you would likely be a member or affiliated with one of or more of the courts. The courts themselves, I've been basing off of face cards and chess pieces. Basically, there's no set ones that are going to be in charge right now. They're all vying for their own power, vying for their own place, and none have really secured a position as top court or anything like that. But I am going to make a few in a future video. We'll be talking about different courts and where they emphasize their efforts and what sort of things they're known for within this. I'm going to call it the second realm or the second society. I'm not really sure yet, but lore is kind of on the back burner while I work on mechanics. And then for another mechanic that I would argue be the third most important, while not as important as the other two, I'd say it's still fairly good to have as a forefront pillar on what I'm trying to do for this system, and that is the actual magic. Now, this is a little into the mechanics side of things, but magic is actually split into 3 pieces. Occult magic or arcane magic, whichever word I end up using, divine magic, and veil magic. Now, divine magic is pretty self-explanatory. It revolves around the divine. It could be purifying flames, it could be healing, it could be curses, it could be divine wrath, smites, whatever. Magic you typically associate with divine powers. Arcane magic, or occult magic, I'm gonna stick with arcane for now, and then if it changes, I will update in a future video. Is meant to be your general wizardry, witchcraft, stuff like that. I do intend on doing some more research on this and making it a little more accurate to real-life witchcraft or real-life things, just not perfectly, but at least referencing and somewhat understanding how the process works to make it a little more realistic. But arcane magic is typically associated with fireballs, curses, curses could be on there, various fortune-telling, stuff like that. It has some overlap with divine magic. All of them will overlap a little bit with certain more generic concepts, but right now the 3 are split into arcane magic being your offensive spells, and divine being your buffs and your healing, veil magic being primarily focused on debuffs, transportation, and summoning. Veil magic is explicitly like raw magic drawn from a veil, whereas arcane magic is refined and processed into a usable form. Divine magic is processed in a similar but different to arcane magic by going through faith rather than study. Veil magic is just tapping into raw arcane energy and drawing that out and shaping it into a form, typically in the form of summoning and binding a creature to you. And on the second half of that would be the mechanics of abilities and things that aren't magical in nature but still rather unusual, such as like sniping, camping, crafting, all those mechanics. Those are the 3rd main pillar. All those mechanics on magic and technology and natural character abilities working together as a 3rd. So with 2 lore pillars, 2 mechanical pillars, I believe this is a solid foundation to get started on, and we'll be focusing on each individual pillar as well as more in-depth videos at some point. I'm not really sure how I'm going to get across what each one does, but yeah, for now it's a start and it's actually kind of useful. For the actual mechanics of this system, I have decided not to use a D20 system. I'm actually using a D10 system. Now this may change. It's still in the testing phase. I've tried a couple different things, but right now I'm using a D10 system where you roll 2d10, and depending on your results as success or failure, you add modifiers. It's very similar to a D20 system. This is actually inspired by a couple other systems that I've been looking at, and I decided this is the one I want to test out right now. I've been tried a couple things again. I've tried a D20 system, I've tried a D12 system, I've tried the D10 system, I've tried a D6 system, I tried a card system, which was very much not working. Though I would try it again with the knowledge I have now, maybe see if it works better. However, that one's again on the back burner, very far on the back. It's not going to be used anytime soon. The reason I chose a D10 system for my current test is D6 system I found, while it works, it's very finicky to pick out DCs. A D20 system felt too similar to D&D with the way it worked. I didn't like how it just felt like I was rehashing D&D out, because that was the only way I could make it work. A D12 system would be kind of cool. It's either going to be that or D10s most likely, but I found a mechanic I really want to use and that is the idea that the rule of cool actually influences your dice. The way this mechanic works, and I'll be updating this in a future video when I understand remember where I found this mechanic. But basically, if you can convince your DM to do something under the rule of cool, where, like, let's say you convince them to do an action you normally couldn't take just by not only explaining it really well, but also talking and doing it and using your character in a way that's creative, you get an additional die. That die is permanently added to any rolls you make. You can't crit with this die. You only crit with your initial 2 dice that you used. But it means you have easier time making checks now because you're now rolling 3 dice instead of 2. Once every player has 3 dice, then you can upgrade to 4, 5, so on. I think that's it'd be a really useful system. I can adjust it to a D12 version as well, which it wouldn't work for a D20 or a D6 system, but it would work for a D10 or a D12 system. So with that in mind, I've been working with it from that perspective of what can I do that's not only different but fun, and not only that, but what works and what doesn't, which I'll be going into more depth in a further video. I'm rambling again. Okay, I'm gonna reset, and we're gonna talk about a little bit more, and then I'm going to, I'll see if I can display for rules. And so with that, I think that's all I'm gonna really talk about for today. That's been my little intro to Urban Arcana. I'm hoping that I'll be able to introduce more concepts, more pieces, more lore over time as we go here, and I'll eventually have something nice and ready for whenever I get around to making another video. For now though, I will be heading out. I'll see you all around, and hopefully you'll be around for the next one. Yeah, have a good one. See ya.